Freddie Mercury was many, many things. Singer, songwriter, icon, Rami Malek's ticket to a Best Actor win. But he was wrong about one important thing. We do in fact have time for some monkey business. This week on The Backdrop, we're going to be talking about Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, the 10th entry in the Planet of the Apes franchise, which is in cinemas now. Now, The Backdrop isn't a review show, but I had a pretty good time with it. You could say I'm a simp for the chimps.
Monkey!
The recent Planet of the Apes trilogy, directed by Rupert Wyatt and Matt Reeves, is for my money the best blockbuster trilogy of the past decade. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes isn't quite as good, but it's a worthy follow-up. The movie doesn't look quite as good as Matt Reeves' 2 movies, and there's no central performance as compelling as Andy Serkis' Caesar, but it's got an epic sweep to it, a very traditional structure and style. The special effects are impressive, the world is rich, and the drama is compelling. Plus, it remains true to one of the core thematic ideals of the Planet of the Apes franchise dating back to the late 60s. Gorillas are kind of assholes.
George, they're onto us!
And look, for all The Backdrop is a sophisticated show about highfalutin themes and ideas, you put a monkey on a horse and I'm kind of in your corner by default. Now, we're going to be talking about Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes in very general terms here, but if you haven't seen it or you're going to see it, you may want to pause, bookmark the video, and come back later. If, however, you've already seen it or you don't mind a light discussion of the movie's themes or ideas, well, let's quit monkeying around and just get down to it. At its core, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is a story of decline. As if to signal this idea, the film opens with a funeral pyre, a memorial to the great ape Caesar, the chimpanzee protagonist of the trilogy that began with Rise of the Planet of the Apes, and who led his brethren to freedom and war for the Planet of the Apes. His body is cremated, and much of the movie that follows is about the degradation of Caesar's beliefs and his ideals. Caesar becomes an idea that fades and warps over time. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is, in a very real way, a movie about great Caesar's ghost. Of course, those earlier 3 films were themselves a story of collapse. Human society effectively imploded over the course of those 3 films. By the end of Rise of the Planet of the Apes, a viral apocalypse was already spreading across the planet, handily visualized in the movie's closing credits. By the start of Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, the survivors were huddling together in the ruins of cities trying to keep civilization on life support. By the time of War for the Planet of the Apes, the few surviving humans were becoming mute and primitive. However, the story of humanity's decline was paralleled with the ascent of the apes. Caesar was a leader who believed in peace. He instilled in his followers core virtues that quickly became mantras. Apes together strong, and ape not kill ape, and
you start pounding your chest, you karate yourself. You karate yourself.
And of course, these ideals were challenged over the course of the trilogy, initially by the scarred Koba, and later by Caesar himself. But War for the Planet of the Apes ended with Caesar delivering his people to the Promised Land. A monkey Moses. Those 3 films invited the audience to cheer the collapse of a decadent human civilization, one built on cruelty and violence. Caesar had been brutalized and tortured by human beings, from the sadistic animal sanctuary worker Dodge Landon to the mad military leader Wesley McCulloch. However, despite all of this, Caesar was able to find some empathy for humanity, even coming to care for the mute child Nova. There is a cruel irony in this, in the larger context of the franchise. While the literal continuity of the Planet of the Apes series is tangled and, well, let's say ambiguous, every Planet of the Apes movie exists in the shadow of the original. Indeed, discussing Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, director Wes Ball confessed, "Truthfully for me, what was on my plate when we were thinking about this thing was the previous 3 movies, the Caesar trilogy, and the 68 original. These movies are all in conversation with that classic 1968 original movie. In that film, the audience is presented with a civilization of hyper-advanced apes that has conquered and enslaved humanity. That society is corrupt and decadent. It's very much at odds with the society that Caesar wanted to build. It is a culture that's forgotten its own history. Indeed, the movie's iconic final reveal is built on the idea that these apes have become so disconnected from their own past that they've forgotten that the Planet of the Apes was once Earth.
Oh my God, I was wrong. It was Earth all along.
The end of Planet of the Apes remains one of the greatest twists in the history of cinema, and it endures in part because it is so evocative. A culture that forgets or erases its own history is doomed to repeat the mistakes that came before. Any audience even casually familiar with the original Planet of the Apes knows that Caesar's dream of a utopian ape society and a peaceful coexistence between human and ape died and were cremated with him. Appropriately enough, they were interred with his bones. Literary reference, baby! Caesar haunts Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. Throughout the movie, various factions compete for control of Caesar's legacy and to position themselves as his legacy. King Proximus, for example, has his conquering soldiers repeat the phrase
For Caesar.
as a grotesque pledge. In contrast, while Raka adheres more closely to Caesar's beliefs, the finer details are lost. He assumes, for example, that all humans must be called Nova because, well, Caesar helped a human called Nova one time. The feral and primitive humans who drift through the American wilderness have come to be known as the Echo. It's an evocative description of the remnants of a civilization that once controlled the world. These poor, pathetic creatures are just shadows of their former selves, a distant reminder so far removed from their past glory that nobody seems to fully remember what they once were. Like Caesar, they are ghosts lurking on the fringe of a memory. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is loosely structured as a mirror of the previous film in the franchise, War for the Planet of the Apes. Both movies are post-apocalyptic westerns in which the hero is separated from their family. Our heroic ape embarks on a journey to an enemy fortification, picking up a human girl along the way. Their opponent is a madman who has enslaved apes to build a wall. Separated by 3 centuries, the narratives echo. To quote Mark Twain, history does not repeat itself, but it rhymes.
What's wrong with me?
I think you're crazy.
Want a second opinion?
You're also lazy.
Except no, that wasn't Mark Twain. I'm actually making a point that is relevant to the themes of the video and the movie. It turns out it was actually Theodore Reck in a quote dated back to 1965. So I guess all those Twain scholars can get wrecked. Of course, while Kingdom echoes war, there are also inversions and divergences. Caesar was a father and a husband, while our hero Noah is a young ape. The revelation about Nova was that she couldn't talk, while Raka and Noah are stunned that May can talk. In fact, the big moment where May stands up and shouts Noah is a very deliberate invocation of Caesar's iconic no from Rise of the Planet of the Apes.
No!
While McCullough was a human being enslaving apes, Proximus is an ape enslaving apes. This is the biggest difference between Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes and the previous trilogy. While those movies focused on the inevitability of conflict between groups as humans and apes were thrown into conflict, much of the violence in Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is perpetrated within groups. Noah's father, for example, is murdered by Proximus's Lieutenant Silva. And by the way, I just want to pause here and acknowledge the wonder of naming a silver-backed gorilla Silva. I know he's a bad dude, but it's a great name. Similarly, the one death of a major human character on screen is not perpetrated by the apes, but by another human being. Just 300 years into its history, this young ape society is descending into brutality and decay. As with the previous Planet of the Apes movies, this plays as a none too subtle commentary on contemporary America. After all, America itself is also only in its 3rd century.
3 burgers topped with pastrami, a hot dog, cheese smothered in chili, plus a gigantic order of chili cheese fries, all washed down with a 16-ounce milkshake.
The film is saturated with American iconography, to the point that Noah belongs to the Eagle tribe, and the film suggests that Noah is being silently but constantly judged by his father's eagle. In obvious contrast to the original film, Kingdom takes place on the West Coast. Noah's tribal lands end at the Valley. Raka maintains his archive of ape history in the overgrown ruins of LAX. Proximus's kingdom is built on the edge of the Pacific Ocean, the end point of the American West. While McCullough's slave labor force built a wall to keep out his enemies, Proximus has built a wall to push back the tide, to grant him access to a secure vault built into the coastline. With no space to push outwards, Proximus's expansionist impulses have turned inwards, in manners both literal and metaphorical. In a literal sense, Proximus's ambitions have turned back on themselves. His army marches east as he tries to break into the underground bunker. More metaphorically, Proximus has turned his imperial ambitions back on his own people, conquering and enslaving other apes in a desire to build his own empire. On a more fundamental level, Proximus doesn't hope to guide his kingdom into the future, but instead seeks to recreate the past. As with the Eagle tribe, images of American imperial anxiety and fear of decline have often manifested through the suggestion that the United States might be a modern Rome. This fear has been part of the mainstream political discourse going back literal centuries. It was particularly prominent during the early 1960s, the dawn of the American century, and it was reflected in the subtext of the era's historical epics, like Spartacus. This Roman iconography is woven into the fabric of the original Planet of the Apes. As writer Eric Green points out, even beyond the narrative of a civilization decline and the emphasis on slavery that ties it to the historical epics of the era, the apes even have ancient Roman names.
Dr. Zaius.
Goodbye, Dr. Zaius.
For all the myriad issues with Tim Burton's remake of Planet of the Apes,
Hey, that's enough.
the film builds this subtext into its production design. And pointedly, that remake came out a year after Gladiator, which won Best Picture and tapped into millennial anxieties of American decline through the metaphor of ancient Rome. Although this comparison to Rome is always bubbling away through the American subconscious, the fear of imperial decline seems particularly pronounced in contemporary pop culture. The tagline for Alex Garland's provocative Civil War warned audiences that, quote, all empires fall. Dune Part 2, the highest grossing movie of the year so far, is the story of the end of an empire and the fall of an emperor. Even the titles of sequels like Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire and Ghostbusters: Frozen Empire suggest some imperial anxiety rippling through pop culture, even if it's left unarticulated within the films themselves. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is a film about the slow march of a young culture towards degradation and collapse. It feels like a narrative where the characters' lack of awareness of their history only deepens the tragedy that the audience knows is waiting in their future. These characters do not know their past and so are destined to repeat it. The viewer knows their future and is condemned to watch.
You may not like what you find.
I've been Darren Mooney, and this was The Backdrop.
I love you, Dr. Zayas.